So, Unit 6. Okay, so this is talking about the 80-20 rule. So, in 1896, Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian economist, made a unique observation while harvesting peas. He found that 80% of his peas came from 20% of the pods. Pareto observed the same pattern in wealth distribution. 80% of the land in Italy was held by 20% of the population. So the 80-20 principle is that 80% of the outcomes or outputs result from 20% of all causes. What are three other names for the 80-20 rule? Another way to say this is the Pareto principle or law of vital few. And then principle of factor sparsity, sorry. Okay, do the numbers always add up to 100? No, it's not a hard rule. And it's just kind of like a guidance. This is typically how things work. It doesn't always necessarily mean that it's going to fall in that realm. Okay. All right, what are the three applications to everyday life? So in businesses, 80% of revenue from business come from 20% of the product. Investment, 80% gains come from 20% of your stock. I'm sorry, my handwriting is terrible. We're just gonna work through it. And the last one is agriculture. 80% of the crops produced by 20% of seed. What is a fractal? This is kind of cool. This is a never-ending pattern. And if you actually look up fractals, these are like images that are never ending. So it means that, let me scroll down. So what does it mean to say that 80-20 principle is fractal? That means that 20% of 20%, oh my goodness, of the activity produces 80% of the 80% outcomes, which means that 4% produces 64% outcomes. And 20% of 20% of the activity produces 80% of 80% of 80%, which means that it produces 0.8%, produces 51.2%, etc. Which we're going to explain that in just a second. So don't get bogged down by the wording. Okay, looking at the next page. List 3 positive beneficial examples. All right, so 80% of software glitches are caused by 20% of bugs. Okay, 80% of crimes are produced by 20% of the criminals. And 80% of your stress is caused by 20% of your problems. Okay, 3 negatives. 80% of the points in a test come from 20% of the problems, 80% of wealth is owned by 20% of the people or population, and 80% of investment gains is caused by 20% of the stock. All right, so let's kind of figure out, is the 80-20 principle really true? Like, does it actually work out? So down here at the bottom, it's got the top 50s of 2016. 2016 was a pretty good year. That's when Finding Dory came out. Wars Story? I don't know what that is. Deadpool came out. Zootopia came out. Yeah. Okay. So the top 20%, and we're looking at amount percentage of total. Okay, so we are going to add up the top 20%. So 1, 2, 3, 4, all these numbers are over here. We're going to add all those up. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. The top 20%. That's right here. 3,789.2. That's where we're getting that from. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and fill that in, the top 20%. And we're going to put that right here. So 3,789.20. Okay, we're going to do the second top 20%. So looking at your table, looking at the second top 20, where's that at? Right here, Koku paid a 3. And so we're going to take that, we're going to fill in our little table. So take a moment, go ahead and write all those out. I'm going to fill that in. And all those numbers can be found in that little table. Oh, I think I'm off one. Whoops. I'm gonna get it right. I promise. It's this part, that part, that part. And then percentage of the total. So you're going to take each one of these and you're going to divide it by the total number that was made. So we're going to take 3,789.20 and we're going to divide it by that total number. And that would be, if you added all of those up, 8,279.30. We multiplied it by 10. That's going to give us 45.77%. Okay. So when you do that, you're going to get 21.86%, 13.70%, 10.38%, 8.29, 12.30, 6.43, and 0.76%. Okay, now, is the top 20% exactly equal to 80% of the overall gross revenue? No. So top 20% was only 45, right? Okay, so coming down here. No, it wasn't. And the ratio for that is we take the amount that was for the top 20% out of the total. And that gave us 45.77%. So it's not the same. Now compare the top 20 to the bottom 20. So the top 20 is 5 times the bottom 20. And you can look at that from 686.6 versus the 3,789.20. Yeah. And so we're going to do 3,789.20 divided by 686, and that's going to give us 5.5. Okay. Is the top 4% of movies equal to 64% of the overall? No. And that was, if you look at your little table, 1,018.5 divided by 127.4. So again, looking at the top and the bottom. And that's going to give us about 12.3%. And then when you compare the top 4% to the bottom 4%, and compare the top 4% to the bottom 4%. Oh, I'm sorry. I did that last one wrong. Apologize. See, this is why you shouldn't read it off of paper. You should actually read and do the problem yourself. So on this one, this is 1,018.50 out of the total, which is 8,279.30. And that gave us about 8. Okay. On the next one, the top 4 to the bottom 4 is going to be 1,018.5 divided by 127.4, and that gave us 8. There we go. Okay. Now, is the top 1% of movies exactly equal to 50%? No. And the ratio for that, again, use your table, 532.2, and we're going to divide it by 8,279.3, and that gives us about 6.43%. So based on this data, if you were a movie theater manager, would you only focus on the predicted top 20% of movies? No. Since it is responsible for only 45.77%. If we only played the top 20% movies, we would not make as much money. Yeah. So suppose you had 20 dress shirts in your closet. The 80-20 rule suggests that if you wear 20% of the shirts of 80% of the time, if you kept only the shirts you wear most and gave the rest to charity, about how many shirts would be in your closet? So 20% of 20 shirts is 4. So you would have 4 shirts in your closet. If you were in business and 80% of sales come from 20% of the customers, you would want to get the most sales. If you have 43 customers in total, how many customers should you give your best sales person? So again, 20% of 43 is going to be about 8.6 customers. So you would give 9 customers. Okay.